Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of Authors to Know and Their Books to Read. My name is Martinique Brown. I'm so excited that you guys have decided to tune into the show today. Today I have author Nolan Holloway Jr., A.K.A. Mr. Scribe, on the show. I'm so excited that he's on the show and joining us because he has written a book called Into My Rotation, a collection of Scribes. Mr. Nolan, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here, and I was looking forward to meeting you via Zoom and getting an opportunity to share some of my work.
Yes. Are you guys ready to step it up? He's a poetry writer, y'all. He's just not any author. He writes poetry. So, Nolan, if you could go ahead and let the viewers just know a little bit more about yourself, that would be great.
Okay, well, I live in Atlanta now. I've been in Atlanta since 1995, but I was born in the Bronx, New York. I don't know if you can tell by my accent that I'm from up top. So I was born and raised in Queens, lived in New York for basically most of my life, and got married in '83, 2 kids, and I was working for MTV. And,
really?
Yeah, I worked for them for 9 years, and that's what got me to Atlanta. They were basically giving people an opportunity to relocate. So we talked about it, and I never thought I would leave New York, but it was California, Chicago, New York, or Atlanta. California was too far. Chicago was too cold, so the last choice was Atlanta. So I've been here since '95. So kids have grown up. I'm a grandfather. So life has changed. So a lot of stuff is going on. But native New Yorker to my heart. Even though I live in Atlanta, I'm still from New York.
And I think that was so cute that you actually called it up top. I've never heard it called that before.
Yeah, that's what we always say. We always call it. Well, where you going? We going up top.
So now, are you still with MTV?
No, that was a long time ago. I transitioned here with MTV, and then they went through an economical thing, and I ended up getting laid off and decided that I would basically stay in Atlanta rather than relocating back to New York.
Okay, I understand. So Nolan, what type of writer would you describe yourself as?
I've been told that I'm a philosophical poet. I've done interviews, and this one Canadian radio show did an interview with me a few months ago, and the co-host was saying, I've read some of your work and you sound very philosophical. So I just kind of took on that moniker of being, not that I'm really thinking when I'm writing, but my poetry tends to be, people say it's deep, it's very thought-provoking and things like that. So
So now, how did you even become interested in poetry?
Okay, that's an interesting story. I'm 61 now, and I didn't start writing poetry until 51.
Okay.
So I was dating somebody at the time because I had been divorced for a number of years, and just wrote a little simple, little rhymey type poem, and she liked it. So after that, nothing else happened. We ended up not being together, and just at work one day, the poetry just started to pour out. I just got an inkling and just started writing stuff down, and just kind of putting it aside. I would type some out on my computer or handwrite it. And before I knew it, had over like 200 poems.
Wow.
It just kept pouring out. No real topic or subject or anything like that. It's just that something just moved me. I would just write it. So from that point, it was, now I'm like, well, okay, what do I do with these? I would share with family and friends, and they seemed to enjoy them. So what I did was, being a tech head, got on the internet and started looking up poetry websites, and found this one called Moontown Cafe. So got the nerve and started posting my poems on the site, and got really good positive feedback from the other poets that I would read their work and critique, and they would read my work and critique. And I got really positive feedback from that. So that lasted for a while. So I would just continue to write and just share my poems online.
So were you even interested in poetry? Because I can write, rhymey stuff for people, but it's not something that like I do all the time. Because you said you didn't start writing until 51. You know, so were you always just interested in poetry, going to poetry nights and things like that?
No, I wasn't doing any of those. I wasn't doing any of those things. I mean, once in a while, you know, I'll read poetry here and there, but it wasn't something I was really focused on. It just so happened that after that situation, I don't know what it was. It was just that I just felt the words and they just simply came out.
So why did you actually decide to write your book, Into My Rotation, a collection of scribes?
Okay, that happened basically when I had all the poems all written out. I was wondering, okay, what I'm going to do. I've been sharing on the websites, going to different places. So a friend of mine that I used to work with in New York, she lives in Texas. She said, you know what, why don't you write a book? Which is something I never thought of either. And I had no idea how to get started. So I started researching things online, but it's very expensive to get published. So I think I saw a couple of publishing companies, but one company wanted $5,000 to edit, distribute, do all of that. I didn't have that kind of money. So what I did was just being on Facebook, I reconnected with a friend of mine, Beverly from New York. And she said, oh, I've written books and I started my own publishing company. So the light bulb went off and I said, oh, I've written some poetry but she was into fiction. So she said, well, why don't you just send me some samples of your work and I'll see. So I sent her 3 pieces. I just selected 3 poems, sent them to her. And she basically got back with me and said, you didn't really write those, did you? So she thought they were very good. So when she and I went into the journey of, I got my friend to edit. So it was all via email. You know, I would email her the manuscript. She would edit it and I would go back and forth. I designed the cover of the book. And 6 to 8 months later, I had my first printed book.
But is there anything behind the title?
Yeah, Into My Rotation it was a group of guys that we shot pool every week. So what we would basically say is, what's your rotation for tonight? So are you going to meet over, because we had 2 friends with pool tables. So are you going to go to Omar's tonight? So we said, well, that's in my rotation. That's it.
Oh, because you would go to multiple billers.
Right. Or is just that it's in my rotation of events or things that I'm going to be doing. It's like with you, if you're busy, you would say, hey, Martinique, are you coming in? Well, I'll see if it's into my rotation.
I got you.
So that's where the book came from. And it was a lot of poetry that was focused on how I saw the world. So Into My Rotation, and then a collection of scribes. Sometimes I call them poems, but I just felt wow, to say Scribes sounds kind of cool. And then my name came out of that as well, because I'm A.K.A. Mr. Scribe.
Right. So now, did you actually start calling yourself Mr. Scribe like a few months ago or a year ago? Or like?
No. It's been a while, because as I'm writing and some of the poetry that I sign, I always use the copyright symbol. Sometimes I would sign it Nolan P. Holloway Jr. And then at other times, because I was using that name as my pseudonym online, I just started signing it Mr. Scribe.
Okay, I understand. So now you guys are really in for a treat. Nolan is actually going to read to us one of his poems.
This one is called Progression and Regression. And a lot of them has to do with, and it's in the first book didn't have chapters, it had rotations, like a spiritual rotation, an introspective rotation, a romantic rotation. So in other words, all of these poems revolve around my life and my experiences. That's why I call them rotation. And this one is Progression and Regression. It's like moving forward, coming back. So this is where this piece came from. And it begins like this. Moving forward and making changes, past the tugs at the edges of my mind battles between clarity and confusion, which leave me barren and numb, frustrated because I know where the help is, available for me to tap into. Having the alien intellect to reason logical outcomes to irrational situations. Words tumble out that make no sense compared to what the brain calculates. To one that I speak to has no idea what is happening. Think I'm tripping. Started the day on the progressive, thinking positive, and looking to making my day joyous. I don't even understand the process, so how can I explain it to the person that wants to be involved? Progression pulls forward, regression backwards. Need the balance of the opposite to keep my sanity intact. No, I'm not crazy, but the grip is slipping, slowly slipping. You know you can you know you?
Snap it up, snap it up. So with so many books of poetry out there, why should we actually add your book to our collection?
Well, I think you should because I try to speak to where people are. I try to use my experiences as far as joy, romance, pain, and being a Black man as well, my perspective on life. And if you want to get, I think with poetry is important because no matter who the poet is, you get a snippet of society, you get a snippet of life, you get a snippet of culture from reading different poets. You know, so I think that it would be a journey for them to experience and to kind of share some of myself.
So now I know that you said that you're in the Atlanta area. Do you ever speak at poetry nights?
Yeah, Atlanta is has a very great outlet for poetry. There are places where you can recite your poetry, libraries, spoken words. As a matter of fact, I have a good friend of mine. She puts on a monthly show every second Saturday, and it's called Do You Lyric Lounge. So she'll have musicians, poets, actors, and I've spoken a number of times on her platform. So yeah, whenever I have an opportunity at churches, what I really want to do is if people are into poetry and have a book club, they can get the book and I can actually come out and read some of the poetry and basically give them the backstory of where that particular piece came from and where I was emotionally and physically when I wrote it.
So now tell us the backstory of the poem you just read to us.
The poem I just read was when I was being very introspective. I was single at the time, dealing with different wasn't in a relationship, but just dating at the time. And it was like a tug and pull, push and go. It's like, you know, you give, they don't give, they give, you don't give, that back and forth type thing. So from that came this piece.
So now, was it a collection of women that it's about, or is it one woman in particular?
It's about the collection of experiences I had. Sometimes the focus was on that particular woman, but it would be generalized because my experience would be similar in different situations, and then the piece would just get birthed from that.
So does anybody know that they may have influenced that poem?
They probably don't. Unless they read my books, they may know. But if they
or
haven't
watch
read it,
the
they
show.
Or exactly. If they're looking, then they might know. But there were some specific pieces that when I wrote it, I know exactly who I was talking to at that particular time.
That's good. That's good. So I know that you actually wrote 2 other books called, one of them is called Journey to the Poetic Light Illuminations, and your other book is called Life Between the Words. Can you just tell us a little bit more about those 2 books?
Yeah, Journey to the Poetic Light. I had continued, obviously after the first book, I continued to write poetry. So I wanted to do a second book, and I didn't know what the theme was going to be, but I just continued to write. So I said, okay, let me hold off on the writing and go back and started reading through the poem. And somebody gave me some good advice. They said, read your poems out loud so they can resonate, so you can hear your voice when you're speaking and it resonate. And most of the poetry resonated with light. So the theme came together. So then I had to go back and go through all the different poems and categorize them with where they be. And then the second book also has transition. It's inner light, which is inside of me, out of luminance, what I see, dim, because at times I've been depressed and melancholy, but because I'm a believer and have faith, new light was the last rotation.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So how else are you inspired from your poems, or where do you draw this inspiration from in writing?
Just on what now it seems as though a lot of my poetry is centered around social issues. I've written pieces in reference to the Ferguson incident, a piece about how discrimination and racism plays a part in my life, even though I may not have it directly. I mean, we're all around social media, the news, what's going on in our world at this point. So a lot of my poetry seems to now be going in that direction.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? I never thought about that, but I feel that, as somebody collects your books, then they can actually see like the transitions and changes
Right,
of that
exactly.
particular author. That's amazing. I just never, all these shows that I've done, I've never thought about it like that.
And I've seen the transition in myself as well. The first book is mostly centered around my experiences, but in the second book, I go outside of myself because, yeah, inner light, yes, it's in me, but what I see is outside. So people can resonate with, oh, he saw that particular situation and he responded in a certain way. I've been there before, I've experienced that before. And then Life Between the Words was cathartic for me because my mother suffers from Alzheimer's.
Okay.
And my sister's been her caretaker for a long time. So a lot of that pain and me watching her go from being able to have a conversation like I'm having a conversation with you now to she doesn't even recognize who I am. And in between that time that she had been diagnosed with cancer and the dementia came on, my brother suddenly passed away. And I had a daughter who I was estranged from for a number of years, and we reconnected. And about a year and a half after we reconnected, she died a mysterious death. And to this day, we still don't know what happened. So through that, through me trying to continue to be strong in my faith and a way to, I wouldn't say ease my pain, but to get it out, I wrote. And that's where Life Between the Words came from.
Okay. And I just appreciate you for telling us that on the show, because that's one of the reasons why I want to create this show, because so many times, we'll see authors promoting their book, but we have no idea like the reason behind why they wrote their books or their pieces.
And that's important for me because part of what you asked me earlier about, okay, what drives me, what motivates me, the response that I get when people purchase my book and they come back to me. That's why I always want, good or bad, if you purchase the book, put a review on Amazon. Even if it's not a good review, that's what fuels my creativity. If you come back and say, wow, Nolan, I really read this particular piece and it moved me to tears, or it made me think about where my life is going, or anything along those lines. I've had people come back and tell me that my poem that I wrote brought them to tears because of what I wrote about. So that lets me know that particular piece, that's what I was feeling when I wrote it. The pain or the depression or the joy and the happiness. If they get that from my poem and I know it resonates, that's what drives me.
But let me ask you something. When an individual writes maybe a negative critique about your work, don't you feel that kind of stifles your creativity because maybe you'll second guess about how you'll write something?
No, as a matter of fact, I've gotten some negative critiques, but not that many. So I'm not going to get big headed or too full of myself. But my thing is that, but the only thing I ask, if you're going to give me a negative critique, you need to give me an explanation. You can't just say, oh, that was a bad scribe or that was a bad piece. I want to know why you felt too many cliches or it was fragmented, or you got to tell me what part of the piece that maybe was disjointed. I need an explanation. I just don't need because people do that online all the time. They'll just say, I didn't really feel that poem. Okay, what did you feel about it? And people tend to, when you push them like that, then they're really not, sometimes they'll just do it and not really think about how they're thinking about the piece. They'll just make the comment, but then when you push them and hold them accountable, sometimes they'll change their mind or they soften there. But I welcome both. I welcome both.
That's good.
We need to know why you don't like it. And we use some of that to improve. And we can, I'm from New York, I got thick skin, so I can take criticism. But for me, it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe I need to rethink that, because when I write, it depends on how the poem comes out. Sometimes the poem comes out, I don't touch it. I just leave it as is. Other times it'll come out, I'll push it to the side, leave it full, and then come back to it and make changes to it. It all depends on how that piece comes out. Sometimes the title comes, there is no poem. Then the poem comes, or vice versa. I write the piece, but I don't have a title. So it could be either way. So sometimes I walk away from it. Sometimes I will tweak it and I just get that feeling, okay, that's it, it's done. No matter whether it's 4 lines or it's 100 lines.
Yeah, yeah. So how did you actually gain confidence with saying your poems in front of people?
I'm pretty outgoing and pretty social, and I know a lot of poets talk about when you write poetry, you really expose yourself. I mean, you can write fiction and make other characters, and you can kind of put yourself in it. But as a poet, you're putting your innermost feelings outside of yourself. And I never had that fear, but I've talked to other poets who have written poetry but never shared it. They have a whole notebook, leaf book on their laptops or whatever, and they're afraid to, and I've asked them, well, why I'm just not ready to share. And I respect that. I don't try to push anybody to put themselves out there. And my thing is, I don't really memorize my poems. So when I go to open mics, I'm different from some of the other poets. I don't feel intimidated that, okay, they can get on stage and recite this long piece where they can have it because they have it in their head because that's performance poetry. I consider myself a poet. I can get on stage at a podium and read my work, and I don't feel like my poetry is any less important than because they can memorize. But sometimes you go to open word or spoken word, and they'll make you feel inferior because you don't have your pieces memorized. But I'm pretty self-confident, so it really doesn't bother me that much.
So now, what would you say to somebody that actually enjoys writing poetry, but they do feel intimidated when they do go to these spoken words and things like that?
My recommendation to them would just be continue to go to the spoken word, and you'll just get that feeling one day that you'll just have a piece, whether you memorize it or just that it'll just have to come out. And you'll get that, you may stumble over some of the words, but once you start doing it a couple of times, obviously you'll gain confidence and you'll be able to get in front of it. I never really had an issue with getting in front of a group of people and speaking, even when I was a teenager. I just had that, and I don't know if it's confidence or just a non-fear, but once I was prepared, I was able to stand in front of people, and whether it was a presentation or me having to do a training or whatever, I've always been okay in that kind of environment. So
that's good. That's good. And when you were talking about the individuals that write a lot of poetry, but they do not want to share it, yet that really reminds me of authors that write memoirs, just of their lives. And I always ask them the question, like, how did you become so comfortable with sharing such intimate details about your life? And they more so say it's a type of therapy for them in helping them dealing with whatever they were dealing with at that time. Do you feel the same way in writing your poetry? That is therapeutic in some way?
It is therapeutic because I tend to, when I was growing up as a teenager, I kept a lot inside. So anger comes and other emotions come when you bottle things up. And poetry frees me. It frees me to be who I am. And if you want to know about me, read my poetry. I mean, I can share who I am with you, but if we're not in constant communication, if you want to learn about Nolan, then you can open up one of my books and read, wow, this is where he's at when he's in pain, or this is where he's at when he's joyful. So you'll see a whole game. And that's what life is all about. We're not happy all the time. We're not sad all the time. We're joyful at times. We're depressed at times. We're heartbroken. We deal with all different types of situations where people are not nice to us and all of that. So if that's the case and I need to get that out, then that's just my way of expressing myself.
Do you have any poems, though, that you have written just for yourself and you know that you will not release them?
Everything I've written, there's been poems where I just didn't feel the quality for me wasn't where I was going to put it in my book. So I have all my poems written, but I basically pick and choose which ones, especially when I have the concept of the theme that's going to go in the book. I've got all my poems, and but I would read any of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess I'm just, okay. So I probably about 3 years ago, I actually started writing my prayers, and I throw my prayers away like as soon as I write them, because I don't want nobody reading my prayers, because it's just.
But you never know who that can touch, and that's
I don't need nobody to hey, that's not my ministry.
No. Well, you understand. Well, see, for you understand that those are just for you, and they're not to be shared. But you have that perception. That's the thing. There's certain pieces that I've written that somebody has asked me to write, or I had to go into a place within myself in order to write it. Okay, I have a piece called, I'm not sure if it's in this book, it's called Recovery. I had a friend that I worked with, one of her friends was going through rehab. So she just walked up to me at work one day and said, I have the title of a poem. The name of the title is Recovery. I need you to write a poem. So because I had dealt with addiction at a point in my life, that's the place that I went to write the poem. Now, had I been ashamed that I was addicted at one time, or not really wanting to share with anybody that I had been in that place, because the people that know me now don't know my past, but I was open enough to go into that dark place, pull that out in order to share. And the validation I got from the piece was she shared with me when her friend went to group, she read my poem in group and it brought her to tears.
Okay.
So that's when I knew.
Yeah. And I don't want to, because we might have new people that's watching the show and like, dang, Martinique, you don't share nothing. No, that is totally not me. I do believe, I'm a Christian as well. And so I truly do believe that our testimonies are,
Amen,
very powerful, and they bring people to Jesus Christ. But I was just more so talking about like just like me praying to God about specific things or people or, so, but yeah, I don't have a problem being open and honest, but it's just some things that just between you and God. But I just wanted to know from you, like, is there things that, like, because you said that, writing your poetry is therapeutic. And so some things is just that you just want to keep, with yourself. Not saying like you don't already know it, but like since writing is a form of.
But those type of things that are deep inside of me really haven't manifested itself in my poems. At least not yet. Not that it couldn't.
Okay.
But as of yet, between all three books with the light, the dim, sometimes I went to a place that was uncomfortable in that dim and depressed place, but nothing to that particular level where something deep inside of me, needs to come out. And if it did, it would, sometimes it does when I dream, but then I can't remember when I wake up. So can't remember. It's some really good stuff. But as of right now, it hasn't. Maybe with what I'm writing now, because it's more going to a social, maybe it'll turn into something that's inside of me that may want to come out. But right now, that has not happened.
I understand. So now you guys, he said not yet. So we don't know when. That's why it's important for you to go to the description box and make sure that you like and follow his Facebook page. Also, if you're interested in purchasing Into My Rotation, a collection of Scribes, make sure you go to the description box. And I have Nolan's Amazon website and the Barnes & Noble link where you can actually purchase his book as well as his other books. So do you only write books of poetry now?
Yeah, not people, but a few people have said over the time that I've been writing, oh, you should write short stories or a novel. And I've gone to different book sites and stuff, developing characters and doing research. And so I may venture into short stories. It hasn't happened yet, but I got a real vivid imagination. So I may do a book of poetry with some short stories sprinkled in, but still not sure about that yet. So I'm just open. There's a few things that I have on the burner. Like I would like to do a CD and basically recite my poems to original music.
Oh, that would be nice. That would be nice. So what advice would you actually give to somebody who is interested in writing a book?
The information I would give to them is write. I mean, you'll come to points where you'll have writer's block and nothing will come. But if you have the gift and you truly believe you do, you'll get spurred by something will happen. It'll spur you to write. Once you've completed your writing, I researched. I went online, and there's so much information that's out there, but you got to be careful because there's a lot of folks that will take your work and basically you'll pay money to have it edited and the book is not good quality and they'll take your money and you don't hear from them. So you really have to be very, very careful. I was very fortunate that my friend for the first book is blackcurrantpress.com is her own publishing company that she started. Now the second two books is from a group called Creative Talents Unleashed, and Raja lives in California. We've never met, but I became part of the group and shared my poetry. And she shared with me, I help authors get published. So when she and her started talking, her price was very, very reasonable. She and I worked together. She even had me work with a graphic artist to design the cover. And after the process, and she made it better. And what she was doing is kind of transitioning now. But what she would do is the money she would collect from the different publishing contracts, she would escrow it. And an author that couldn't afford it, she would gift that author.
Oh, wow.
With a contract. And the contract was a 5-year contract where she's transitioning to some other things. So I've come out of contract with her, but she's still in the business of publishing people's books. So there, anybody can get in contact with me. I can give them the link if they're really serious about it, and they can just have a conversation with her and she would work, recommend an editor, because graphic arts is very important. If you have a book, the cover, as you would know, is very important because what gets a person's attention if they're in a bookstore or, people still read books. I know you're online with ebooks and stuff, but she can walk you through the process. And being an independent author is not easy because you have to promote yourself. I don't have a big publishing company behind me pushing, basically, here's Mr. Holloway. They're going to, pay for my tour and I travel around. If I travel, I keep inventory. I gift my books to people or I've, been at different venues and things like that and have sold my books.
That's good. That's good. So now, not only are you an author, but you actually have a radio broadcast and it's called Level Up. And it actually airs on Sundays from 3 p.m. until 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I actually have those links in the description box. Remember, viewers, I tell you, I hook you up. I put all this stuff there so you don't have to go Googling stuff.
And I appreciate that too, Martinique. When I saw it, I was like, wow, she really does her homework. And that makes it easy on me. So that's fine.
Yes. You have to. Because I hate so much when I'm interested in somebody that I watch. And then I'm like, how do I stay in contact with this person?
How do you get in touch with them?
Yeah.
How do you keep it? Because those links are important because you may want, who knows, we may collaborate later on. You never know.
Yep, that is so true. And you just never know who is watching. So can you let our viewers know what they would expect to hear when they listen to your broadcast Level Up?
Well, Level Up is not, I'm the co-host of the show. Level Up is a brainchild of Angie Corman, who I go to church with. And she just started having conversations with her girlfriends in reference to testimonies about life stories and life. Our pastor talks all the time about, how do you know about somebody? Tell me your story. You tell me your story, Martinique. I'll know where you came from, how were you raised, all these different things. So she started to show under that premise, and she's been doing it for 4 years. As a matter of fact, I was a guest on her show, like I'm a guest on your show. And she approached me in November of last year and said, what do you think about co-hosting? I'm like, and people had kept telling me, Nolan, you have a radio voice. You need to be on the radio. So when she came to me, I immediately said yes.
Yeah.
And basically on the show, we just bring people, ordinary people with extraordinary stories. Okay. And we have different themes. Right now, our themes is arts and entertainment. As a matter of fact, not last Sunday, the Sunday before last, we had a pastor on, and we had Sister Perry, as she known now. You guys know her as Pebbles. Okay. The recording artist was on our show sharing her transition from being in Hollywood and a singer to serving Christ, ministering to people through her music. So that was, and I've really met a lot of great people. We had a mime on, we had a Christian rap artist. It's just basically glorifying God through people telling their stories. No fanfare, no showing out. It's just these people, their struggles, their triumphs, their victories, and they all attributed to their belief in Christ.
That's good. That's good. So now, can you conduct these interviews virtually? Like, do you, if somebody feels that they have a great story, everybody feels they have a great story.
Yeah, true.
Would you like them to reach out to you, or would you just like to find them?
No, they can reach out. They can inbox me. We have a producer. Okay. So all they would need to do is inbox me, and I would forward their information to our producer that would get in touch with them, because she's the one who sets up all our guests. Okay. And gets them prepped, gets the bios, the photographs. Angie does the flyers for the show. And my role, besides being the co-host, I do the music, I do the engineering and the flow of the show. So like what you did when you have your commercials and your breaks, I'm the one who regulates those things to keep the show, give the cues. And I'm really, really enjoying it. I'm having a great time with it.
That's good. That's excellent. So guys, I thank you all for just taking time to watch another episode of Authors to Know and Their Books to Read. And Nolan, I thank you just for being on the show and just helping us just learn more about you and the reason behind, some of your poems in your book, Into My Rotation, a collection of scribes. If you guys truly enjoy our shows, we would love for you to go ahead and visit the description box and like and follow our Instagram account as well as our Facebook page. You can follow Nolan on Twitter and LinkedIn, and make sure you visit his website as well. And that's another place that you can purchase his book.
Yes, it is. Yes.
I hope you guys have a great night, and we will talk to you all later. Bye-bye.
Take care. Good night.